So it's my distinct honor to welcome our next speaker and to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Charles Lim. Dr. Lim is the Francis Suey Endowed Professor of Otolaryngology and Head and Neck Surgery and the Chief of the Division of Otology, Neurotology, and Skull-Based Surgery at the University of California at San Francisco. Dr. Lim did his training, both residency and fellowship at Johns Hopkins University, where he stayed on as faculty until 2015, at which time he moved to San Francisco. Dr. Lim was the inaugural director of the National Sound Health Network and leads a National Endowment for the Arts research lab that studies the neural basis of musical creativity. He was selected as the 2022 NIH Clinical Center Distinguished Clinical Research Scholar, an educator in residence, and was named in 2022 as one of the Kennedy Center's Next 50, a group of 50 national cultural leaders. In 2024, Dr. Lim received the Stibitz-Wilson Award from the American Computer and Robotics Museum for advancing an understanding of creativity and music perception. His research on the biological basis of music has been featured in the media and venues worldwide, and you can really measure someone's impact by how they reach even outside of our field. His work has been highlighted by NPR, TED Talks, 60 Minutes, New York Times, CNN, Scientific American, the British Broadcasting Company, the Smithsonian, and on and on. Dr. Lim is an extensively published researcher and one of the world's foremost authorities in the area of music, cochlear implants, and hearing. And incidentally, he also did a recent AOS webinar featuring Huey Lewis. So with that, we invite Dr. Lim.
Good morning. Thank you, Rich, for the kind introduction. Thank you, Nancy, and the American Otological Society for the chance to speak. I may be giving you the least practical talk of all of COSM, and so apologies in advance if, as surgeons, you wanted surgical tips and pearls. Hopefully, though, some of the ideas I'm going to talk about here will stay with you, and you'll reflect on them later. I do have some disclosures. I don't believe any of these are relevant. Hopefully, some of them are creative endeavors. Now, if you think about the history of our specialty, you can see that there have been landmark events, innovations that really transformed the field, whether it was Lempert's work on fenestration that led to the modern stapes surgery, the development around the world of electrical technology that led to the cochlear implant, incorporation of dental osseointegrated techniques for the bone-anchored and osseointegrated devices, Lloyd Minor and team's work on superior canal dehiscence, Charlie Del Santina and colleagues' work on the vestibular implant. These are watershed moments, and then, as we all know, the recent announcement a few days ago of gene therapy. These are scientific advances for sure, but they're also deeply creative works. And the question that's kind of haunted me most of my life, but I've been formally studying this for about 25 years, is what is the biological basis of creativity? And the reason I phrase it to you this way is I want to know where a new idea comes from, because that moment of genesis, the aha moment, the kind of eureka moments, the ones where we now understand something or think in a way that's different than we previously thought, has always fascinated me. And I come to it actually from a background of music. As Rich mentioned, I like music quite a bit, but I think about it from a very different set of lenses. And one of the lenses that I think about is this idea of idea generation. That when I'm listening to music, I'm capturing idea generation in real time. There are many different versions of creativity. And when you think about all of these different kinds of creativity, I want you to understand that it is the brain that is the engineer and author of these. And when you get to something like scientific creativity, of course, it's a different kind of creativity than basketball, or is it? Same thing with surgery. Now, you may not think of yourselves as artists, probably some of you are, both surgically and otherwise. But you probably know that there are times in your cases when you have to be creative to solve the case. In fact, you might not even be able to finish the case if you were not creative. You have to pivot, you have to problem solve, you have to improvise. And so with the notion of improvisation at its core as maybe the quickest version of creativity, let's take a look at Hiromi, the pianist. I can guarantee you one thing, that's not that practical either, but you'll get more in your life listening to her play for an hour than you will out of doing many things, because you will realize what the human brain and body are capable of. And when I watch her, listen to her, think about her music, I think to myself, how is that possible? And then I think to myself, what am I doing as an otologist to try to get closer to the answer to that question? And unfortunately, staring at the temporal bone or operating on the temporal bone, as much as I love it, it doesn't really get me closer to the question of creativity. It doesn't bring me to higher levels of cognition when it comes to hearing. As much as we think about sound and hearing, and as otologists and as audiologists and hearing specialists, we think that we are kind of the masters of the hearing domain when it comes to medicine. How much do we really know about how people in the world that are musical geniuses are using their hearing sense? And I would say that it's not a lot. And so unfortunately, looking at the ear didn't do it for me. And so after I finished my fellowship, I went to the NIH to learn functional neuroimaging. And that's where I decided to kind of focus in on the brain, because it's really the brain that we need to focus in on if we want to understand something like creativity. And nowadays, I tend to think of everybody as basically just a brain walking around with a body supporting it, but that these brains are doing all of these unique individual things. I'm going to get back to the concept of individual exemplars, because I think it's really interesting and important when you think about artists. In medicine, we want averages, we want large scale data. But in the arts, when was the last time you went to go see an average artist? And so we have to think about the extraordinary when it comes to the arts and figure out what that person that's extraordinary can tell us. And so I'm going to give you this postulate here, which is that artistic creativity is a neurologic product. It's a product of our brains. So if that's the case, maybe we can examine it using rigorous scientific methods. Let me show you a video of how we do these functional MRI experiments. So this is a plastic MIDI piano keyboard that we use for the jazz experiments, and it's a 35-key keyboard that is designed to fit both inside the scanner, be magnetically safe, have minimal interference that would contribute to any artifact, and have this cushions that it can rest on the player's legs while they're lying down in the scanner, playing on their back. And it works like this. This doesn't actually produce any sound. It sends out what's called a MIDI signal, or a musical instrument digital interface, through these wires into the box of the computer, which then trigger high-quality piano samples like this. Now I'm going to demo this for you. The first thing you'll hear is memorized music, okay? Memorized. Switch. This is improvised. Okay, so what did I do there? I tried to keep everything constant other than the source of the music that was being played. One was fully overlearned, fully memorized, very predictable, and the other was completely improvised, never did it before, will never be able to do it again. And so in doing that, we have a sense of a control condition, an experimental condition, where we can do a subtraction analysis or a contrast analysis in fMRI speak and get to something like this, which is the brain activations of professional jazz pianists that come to the NIH and play the blues. Yes, I did this at the NIH. Yes, I did this because nobody knew what I was doing at the NIH when I was there for several years. And so what you see is a kind of interesting combination of things in the brain. And so again, we just talked about how there's so many different modes of creativity. I'm not suggesting that jazz is the only one, but I'm suggesting that it's a very important version of spontaneous creativity. And when this takes place, your brain does a remarkable thing if you are a professional jazz player. Number one, your prefrontal cortex of the brain undergoes a pretty broad shutdown, a relative attenuation activity. This is a part of your brain that's involved in conscious self-monitoring. It's controlling the output of what you're doing. Right now, this part of my brain is very active because it's controlling what I do. But you need to have lack of control if you want to be creative. You don't want to over control things. And you can think about this in your life. Things that are automated and routinized, you can do very well. But if you try to all of a sudden control it, you don't do it that well. I had that experience when I was asked to walk on a news clip. And all of a sudden, it's like I couldn't walk because I was thinking about how I looked when I walk. And so meanwhile, there's a medial prefrontal cortex part of the brain that's active. And this is an autobiographical part of the brain. It's part of what's called the default network. The default network is fascinating because it's what your brain is doing when you're not doing anything. Okay? And so creativity is not random. These things are not arbitrary. They're built on something. They're built on your identity, your life, your knowledge, your memories, your thoughts, your feelings, but it's without the constraints of prefrontal cortical suppression. And we think that that dissociated activity is kind of the hallmark of high-level creativity. And so this led to a lot of different questions. And one of them immediately was this idea of what is musical genius? And as Rich mentioned, I have a grant with the National Endowment for the Arts to look at musical geniuses. And we've been looking at a lot of different jazz masters and things like that. And you may all have your musical geniuses. These are some of mine, but these are people that when I listen to their music, I think, how? How is this possible? But not only that, it's changing my life as I listen to it. It's making my life better. It's also making me think in a way that's different. And so some of you are familiar with Esperanza Spalding. She's a remarkable musician. If you don't know her, I encourage you to listen to her. And one thing that makes her a genius is that she can do something like this.
I used to walk in the shade with my blues on parade, but I'm not afraid. It's over. Pass the ride over. Grab your head and grab your coat. Leave your worries on the doorstep. Just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. Can't you hear the pitter-pat?
So she's world-class on both instruments at the same time, and she can improvise on both at the same time. It's extraordinary. And so it was a very good day for me when she asked me if I would scan her brain.
My name is Esperanza Spalding, and here today I'm asked to be an improviser. I have been really curious about how music and healing interface. And I heard that the Kennedy Center was hosting an event called Music in the Brain. Charles Lim was presenting, and I thought he might be a guide and an ally in the larger mission of investigating how music can serve in a therapeutic context. Well, Dr. Charles Lim had me up in this tube, this teeny little tiny tube, singing some samples of music that were memorized and then singing improvised melodies over a blues form.
Okay, we're gonna get started. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. That is her brain.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm really excited to see what commonalities emerge from the minds of all these different creators, who identify as improvisers or who create in a space of improvisation.
So we looked at her brain activity, and this is what we found. When she's doing memorized work, this is what her brain looks like. And look what happens when she starts improvising, okay? So she is really deactivating her brain when we go into an improvised mode. And that's a key take-home message, is that for creativity, it may be less is more when it comes to brain activity, that when you over-control certain things, it's actually less effective. And so it's something to keep in mind. We then had the opportunity to work with a prodigy named Matthew Whitaker, who was born blind. Here's his story.
I am Matthew Whitaker, and I'm a musician. I'm 17 years old, and I'm also visually impaired.
So today we wanted to see what's happening in Matthew's brain while he's doing a variety of things. One was playing a blues, and one was playing a song that he'll play for the Kennedy Center tonight, and another was listening to music that he liked and maybe listening to something that wasn't as interesting. So this is what was not as interesting.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression.
So we actually forced him to listen to that. And this is his brain while he's listening to these things, okay? So he has auditory cortical activity, which is expected because it's sound. He has left lateral prefrontal cortex activity, expected because it's language. Medial prefrontal cortex, I said, this is default. Maybe he's zoning out as he's listening to this. Interestingly, visual cortex, remember, he's blind, no activity. Now, we had him play one of his favorite bands, Snarky Puppy, that sounded like this. And then, so this is what he had with speech, and this is what he had with music. Right? And so when he was listening to music, we really saw entire brain stimulation for him. But interestingly, the visual cortex was aligning. Now, we did a more specific task. When you watch somebody blind play Hammond organ or piano, you think, how can they do that? I mean, how do they get the notes right? So we had him do an octave jumping task in the fMRI scanner. And very interestingly, we saw evidence of cross-modal plasticity because he was using what's called the fusiform gyrus. Maybe some of you may have heard this area of the brain, but it's involved in facial recognition if you have vision. And in him, who he doesn't have vision, he's using the fusiform gyrus to do this piano jumping task. And so part of the way he can do something that most people can't do is by using a part of the brain in a way that it's not normally meant to be used for if there's sensory deprivation during a period of cross-modal plasticity. Now, many of you have children or have seen children. You might be wondering, what is this? So, and why does he look somewhat like me? So this is my son throughout his life doing oddly bizarre creative things. And I can say this, I never taught him any of these things, and I don't know where he learned any of those things. And the upshot is that children are creative, okay? They just come up with things. And you wonder, how is it possible that a child is creative when they don't know much to begin with? And then how does somebody who's creative eventually become a creative genius? What's the connection there between a novice and an expert? So we did an fMRI experiment where we brought children. Children had no piano experience, no musical training. And we basically had them play a pentatonic scale, which is just the black keys of the piano keyboard. Everybody here can do this. There's no wrong notes. There's no mistakes. You play one note at a time, and you either memorize by playing up and down in a scale, or you make up the melody, and it sounds like this.
Listen, then improvise.
So hopefully you can see that what this child is doing, they're not a musician. They don't know anything. We spent half an hour with them to teach them how to do this task. And now we're looking at them creating new ideas. Right? Not a musician, not a piano player, but able to come up with a new idea. And this is functional connectivity analysis showing one very important take-home point. When you are being creative, if you're a child who has no piano playing, your reward areas of your brain show greater functional connectivity than when you are doing a memorized task. And so that's an intriguing idea to me because it gets back to that video of my son doing those things. Why do those things? Why do children come up with all these random things? Maybe because their reward centers are being more active when they do that. And maybe in your own work and in your own lives, maybe some of the work that you're the most proud of has to do with the creativity of it because it's when your reward centers of your brain were most stimulated in conjunction with your work. So with that idea in mind, I just want to leave you with this idea that music is something we love, but it's also a tool, it's a probe, and it can be used to understand the creative brain. And so I hope to continue to do this kind of work. It takes a long time. Anytime I do one of these studies, it takes like years, but in the end, we're starting to get a neural model of how creativity emerges in the brain through the use of musicians and artists and high-level music. And hopefully one day we'll be able to synchronize that or integrate it with models of hearing loss and how that affects sensory perception and hearing. I need to thank several organizations and funding institutions, people in my lab that have been pivotal for this work, in particular Karen Chan Barrett, Patpong Jaradajvang. I could not have done any of this work without the people on this slide. These are some artists that I've had the privilege of working with over many, many years. And it's been kind of a movement, and having the musicians reach out to us has just been phenomenal. And with that, I just want to thank you for your time and attention. Appreciate it.